Hi, I'm Ken King, high performance basketball coach, teacher, and the owner and founder of the Boost Institute for Learning, Literacy, and Growth. Welcome to Real Learning with Real People. These are conversations with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. Using a minimum amount of editing and a maximum amount of authenticity, we want to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning based on their life experience. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and others because I felt they have meaningful lessons to teach and I wanted to make sure they have a platform to share with the world. The language in the videos can sometimes be mature, as I'm always encouraging my guests to be themselves. It's all part of making sure we do our best to give content that is authentic and effective, and you feel like you can utilize this real learning and connect with these real people. Today's guests are the 2019 Women's Spikeball Roundnet National Champs Becca Graham and Jordi Vigna. And before I talk in detail about them, I want to give some background on the craft that they've become exceptional at. This sport grabbed my interest about a year ago when I tried it for the first time, and I have to say it's fun as hell. Spikeball is the company that created that widely used net and ball you see so often, and they are the major drivers behind the sport of roundnet. If you don't have a set yet, I would go out and pick one up. You won't regret it. This is just one guy's opinion. This is 100% not a paid promotion, but for what it's worth, it comes with my full guarantee. If you've never seen this sport and you're listening to the podcast version of this episode, go watch the video version that has some of Becca and Jordi's highlights or search it on YouTube. You'll be impressed. It's one of those sports that you can do it all with. What I mean by that is that you can play it with friends while enjoying beverages on the beach or with multi-generational family in the backyard. You can use it in order to train and get your heart rate up while working on explosive movements and coordination. And on top of that, you can also truly compete and train to beat or be the best of the best. Really, it's a sport that allows for huge participation at low cost and definitely requires a large amount of practice and training in order to be elite at. This is why I'm such a fan, because I believe it's going to be massive. And by the way, it's already pretty damn big. Now, my guests today are simply two of the best in the business. Becca Graham has won the national championship 4 years running, and her 2019 partner, Jordi Vina, is no slouch either, as she has placed multiple times at nationals and continues to grow and push the limits of the craft. You may recognize Jordi's name because she's also the new Director of Business and Leadership with the Boost Institute, and you'll see and hear from her more often on our end. In this conversation, we talk about being in a sport that's growing and maybe even comical to some, though they've clearly never actually tried it if they think that. But we also dig deeper into being competitive female athletes, the stigma that can come with that, communication with their teammates, and building themselves in the sport, all while finding a way to win. Now let's dive into the first ever 3-person episode of Real Learning with Real People with Becca and Jordi. Jordi, we'll start with you, and I just want to hear a little bit about your background, because everything that we talk about based on learning comes from somewhere, and I'm a big believer that it comes from how you were raised or how you grew up or some combination of those kind of things. So Jordi, what was your upbringing like, family life, brothers, sisters, parents, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so my parents, I grew up with them and my sister, and she's 3 years younger than me. And then later on, they got divorced, but we were lucky because like our whole family is very supportive of us, and like that's never changed. So my grandparents, they're all both sides, they're all in the picture, and they've always gone to our events, our school events, our sport events, whatever it was. They've always been huge supporters, and I think we're really lucky because of that. And so growing up, I played a ton of sports, as did my sister. And so we were busy every single weekend and spending time doing that.
Awesome. And it's just the one sister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so tell me a bit about your parents. Like what are they like?
So my dad, he's the financial director of Tony's Fine Foods. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
that.
work's been a huge part of his life. So seeing him, like as hardworking as he is and dedicated to what he does and genuinely enjoy it, has played a huge factor in what I do and how I do it. And then my mom, she's always been an at-home mom. So she cooked for us, she cleaned, all those things, and helped get us place to place because of all the activities that we had going on.
Cool. And this might be a bit of a hard question, but if you had to use one word to describe mom, what would it be?
Um, hmm, welcoming.
Cool. What about dad?
Um, I said it earlier, but probably dedicated.
Nice. All right, we're going to circle back to that, and for everybody watching, this is the first time on Real Learning with Real People that we've done an interview with multiple people. So you're going to get to watch me learn how to negotiate that on the video chat as well a little bit. Becca, I'll hop to you and tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your family.
Yeah. So I have two older siblings. My sister's 4 years older than me, and my brother's 2 years older than me. So I'm the youngest. Um, and yeah, my parents are wonderful. They have always been supportive of each kid individually. Always encouraged us to try new things. My siblings and I all did sports. We all did music at some point or another. We were always trying different things. And yeah, they're sideline parents, always at my games, always at every recital or rehearsal or play or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, something that they definitely put a lot of value on throughout my childhood was hard work. They're both extremely hardworking. They sent us all three of the kids to a private school, and it costs a lot of money, and they've always been hard workers providing. My mom stayed at home until I was old enough to kind of handle things at home on my own, and then she went back to work. But yeah, they're great. They've always, like I said, encouraged each of us to pursue our interests, and they're a big reason why I've been able to get into sports and follow that throughout my adult life even.
Awesome. Same question that I had for Jordi. What if you had to pick a word for mom and a word for dad? What would those be?
For my mom, I would probably say peaceful. She's she's a peacekeeper. She's very calm and kind of has that mellow side. My dad's a little bit the opposite. I'd probably say independent. He's always kind of gone after his own ventures. He's really good with his hands and good with tools, and has always done really well in jobs where he's either self-employed or going after something he cares about.
Awesome. And I guess for some context, Jordi, where are you in America? Where do you live?
I'm from Sacramento, but right now I'm in Quebec.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So earlier when I was making fun of Quebec.
Yeah, that hit the heart.
Okay. Becca, I'll circle back to Quebec in a minute. Becca, where are you?
I'm in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Okay, cool. And so I guess I'm going to connect some stuff back and forth with your sport and your craft, but you both are athletes, and you both couldn't have started in spikeball at a young age. So because spikeball wasn't something that you could have played 10 years ago. So what sports, Becca, we'll go with you first. What sports were you really into growing up?
I started playing soccer probably at like age 6, just like little league soccer clubs, and played all the way through high school. And I also played a little bit of field hockey in junior high and part of high school. And then I played basketball kind of from 5th grade the whole way through high school. So I was a 3-sport athlete a lot of the time. Soccer was probably my favorite. I did intramurals and stuff in college, but basketball was one of my top sports as well.
Cool. Where'd you go to college?
I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, a state school in Western PA.
Nice. I've never heard of it, but I'm in Canada, so.
It's not that big.
How big is it about, do you know?
About 15,000 students.
That's decent size.
Yeah. Not small.
No. Jordi, what about you? What kind of sports were you into growing up?
I started with soccer. My dad played that, so he got me into that. And then from there, I pretty much played any sport that my school or community had to offer. So I started with softball. Then I went to volleyball. And then in high school, I did swim. I did track. I played in a couple golf tournaments, and then college, I started doing intramurals. And so, I forgot basketball. I started with basketball after soccer.
Cool.
And then I started doing flag football as well in college.
Right. And what was your college?
Cal Baptist University.
Is that in Sacramento?
It's in Southern California, Riverside.
Okay. I've been to Riverside.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did a few years ago I did like kind of a West Coast tour and started in LA and worked my way down towards Mexico. Um so okay, why are you in Quebec? What brought you to Quebec right now?
So when we play Spikeball, we travel around the US, and
Yeah.
then we also have a tour series in Quebec.
Yeah.
And so on my way, I was doing like a road trip around the US for Spikeball. And I decided to do online school, and then I work online so I could kind of go wherever I want. And then I started dating someone from Canada, so I moved here, and then I'm hanging out here for a while.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Canadians are always the best for sports, spouses, healthcare. So I
Yeah, it's
don't see you
nice here.
regretting that choice. Um, so as we talk about like your families and your upbringing, and now you being the reigning Spikeball champs, um, you're really like it. I kind of expected you both to maybe play some more individual sports, and I don't know why I thought that, because it's not like you're on a team and you have to work together in your sport, but you both played quite a bit of team sports. But the thing that I'm noticing from both of you now is that you both have a bit of a streak, and Jordi, for you, it sounds like a lot of that, at least I might be putting words in your mouth, but would come from a lot of the stuff that your dad does. And Becca, for you, I think probably from both sides, you're unique thinkers, and you're willing to do things that maybe other people aren't necessarily doing. And Jordi, I'll stay with you for a second. Have you always been kind of that way? Like, have you been willing to be on the outside a little bit, or be a bit of a lone wolf periodically?
Yeah, but I think the reason why Spikeball and you said like individual sports and whatever, well, Spikeball, it's such a community sport. Like it's like it's not just your teammate that you're spending time with, it's everyone that's at the tournament, the people putting on the tournament, and so on. And I think that's why, I don't know if I went around your question, but I think that's why less individual sports and more team sports, for me at least.
Yeah.
And I know you asked me, was I a lone wolf? I
Yeah.
think I had communities in each thing that I did, and so that's why I enjoyed those activities that I did so much.
Okay, cool. Becca, what about you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what Jordi said is absolutely correct. So much of Spikeball Roundnet is the community around it. I've never played ultimate frisbee, but a lot of people compare it to that. There's kind of a very tight knit community around the sport, and that's kind of how the company purposefully designed it. So yeah, that's a huge part. I think people that play and love it and keep playing are partly in it for the community more so than learning a new sport. But yes, I definitely have always been very independent. Don't really have any problem with doing something different. In fact, I like doing something different. And from the beginning, I've been playing for a long time and was one of the first women in the sport that really played much at all. So it was really exciting to kind of have that potential, just to see like, oh wow, I could be, the first women's national champion, or having that kind of in the background was very motivating to me to work at it, and then to just see the growth in the women's side of the sport and see more girls taking an interest and working hard and leveling up essentially is really exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that term too, leveling up. We use that a lot in the stuff that we do, and it's got to be pretty cool, Becca, on your end, because you have been around the sport since it's really gotten to where it's at now. And you've been very, like, how much hardware do you have right now?
I don't know.
Too much.
I've not counted in a while.
How many times have you won? How many times have you won the national championship?
4.
4 times. How many national championships have there been?
5.
So you're doing okay so far. Like
Yeah.
you're
First years, yeah,
and
wasn't
and
ready.
and Jordi, like you're definitely with like the not to make her turn red or anything, but you're definitely with one of the pioneers of the sport in terms of the things that she's accomplished so far. But you haven't. It's not like you're just some scrub that just showed up and kind of rode on her coattails. Like, tell me a little bit about what you did over the last couple of years, because your pathway involves kind of taking a bit of a step progression to that national championship.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, but I think my strength is finding really good partners. Like, to start off, I started playing for like maybe 3 months, and then I found the girl that took second at nationals and ended up teaming with her for my first season. And then we went to nationals and took fourth. And then the year after, so she actually quit Spikeball to start a family. And then I found another girl that was even better than her, and I teamed up with her. And then I found Becca, and so I think that's kind of my strength right now in the sport, and so I'm going to keep saying that.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the key is just to be a sponge. I think to just soak up as much information and as much knowledge from those above me, those the same level, those below me, and then work hard at doing those.
Yeah, and it's cool that you say it like that. Where I think you're probably being a little extra humble, and I think maybe Becca can, as she's nodding, I think you're a little bit more than just a good partner finder. I did a pretty deep dive on the sport and found some videos and stuff like that, and I saw some plays that I'm decently athletic, and I know that I couldn't get to the spots that either of you get to, but that it kind of brings up a question for me. And is there a relationship? And I don't mean this to be funny. Is there a relationship between height and success in spikeball? And Jordi, I'll start with you for no particular reason, but is there any advantage or disadvantage to different heights?
I mean, if you look at the guy that's been not like voted number one for the past couple years, he's probably the shortest male player out there, or at least one of them. But I would say that there's an advantage in different areas. So, for example, for serving, I think there's an advantage if you're lengthy and tall. You're able to cut more angles and work that way. But other than that, I don't know. I wouldn't say, in my opinion, there's a whole lot of advantages in being short or tall.
Right. Becca, what about you? Is there any correlation at all between height and spikeball?
Yeah, no, she's absolutely right. I think it just different. Both have benefits. So the guy she's referencing, the number one team, Chiswick Showalter,
Yeah.
PJ is probably 6'3", 6'4", maybe, and Tyler's probably 5'5". I don't know. I hope he's not listening. I don't know how tall he is. Shorter than me, for sure. And they're both incredible players. They both have different strengths. But yeah, she's absolutely right. If you're long and lanky and have long arms, you're going to be, quick on defense with reaction time. You're going to have, the wide angles on your serves, but a lot of shorter people are really quick and have fast reaction time. So yeah, I would say it doesn't really matter. You can be an excellent player if you're really tall or really short. And there are plenty of both in the sport.
Well, I can tell you with confidence that I'm 6'5" and I have slow reaction time and not the quickest feet or the best hand-eye. And all those things in combination don't lead itself to a high level of success. Um, but but when we go back to both your upbringing, like I think that you both come from a background where you expected to have to earn stuff. Is that fair to say, Jordi?
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, Becca, what about you?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think I don't know that you could be, and maybe you can, if you're comfortable, speak to this, Beck, on I guess the greater whole of Spikeball right now. I would guess that many of the people involved at the highest level right now are kind of that way, because you're really on the cusp of this becoming something big, and I don't think that you're going to get involved in that if you don't have a pretty good understanding of, having to put in work, and really growth mindset is what I'm referencing.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially there are a lot of people at the top who have been playing for a long time, and those are by far the most hardworking individuals. There have been a lot of people kind of rise to the top and then phase out very quickly because of how quickly the sport is developing, that you really have to put in a lot of work if you're going to stay at the top. So even in the men's game, the ones that are consistently in the top year after year, that are earning elite year after year, they're constantly working to adapt with the development of the sport, you know, constantly learning the new serves, learning the new defensive strategies, just to stay on top. And yeah, so that's definitely true.
Cool. And Jordi, like you've played right in, I guess, what I'm talking about, in the sense that you really kind of came in, and whether it was because of switching partners and finding different partners, or whether it was because what I'm going to guess was a little bit more related to your hard work and your attitude, you've really worked kind of up that staircase to being the best in the country, right?
One of them, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and so actually I love that answer. So let's dive into that answer a little bit, because I'm getting the vibe that you're super humble, and that's awesome. And I think that the best champs, because the best champs, A, know that championships are temporary, and B, they're also humble. And when you say one of them, it's interesting to me because I feel like there's a high amount of variability in the actual game of spikeball. Like you can show up, especially at that top level, like most sports, where everybody's a hard worker, everybody's training, everybody's trying to learn, like Becca was saying, and sometimes things don't just go your way for a variety of reasons. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would agree.
And so when you show up to, is it what I call it, a match,
Yeah, a
game,
tournament or
like an individual game? So if you show up to an
okay, yeah.
individual game,
I think
um,
match is fair.
match, okay. When you show up to a match, how do you prepare to start that match as a athlete? Mental. Let's focus on the mental side first. Like, what do you do mentally before you go into, maybe think about like one of the bigger ones.
Um, I think for me, it's important to know why I'm there. So, for example, I'm there because I want to have fun. I want to do well, and I want to perform well. So, going in with the mindset of those goals, I think that kind of takes me along the game.
Cool. Yeah.
Does that
No.
make sense?
Yeah. And really, what you're talking about, and we use it a lot in sport performance and coaching and stuff, is just having that dedicated focus, and a very narrow focus. But we often talk about having a very narrow focus but a very wide field of vision. So making sure that you're breathing and fit enough and that kind of thing, that you can see as much as you need to see to perform well, but mentally you're pretty locked into that one thing. And for you, it sounds like it's enjoying it. Becca, what about you? When you're about to prepare, I think it's fair to say that you know how to prepare for, especially like a championship match or something like that. When you're preparing right before it happens, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. I think confidence is a big factor. And I guess I would say just kind of um, yeah, being really confident in your skills and abilities. The worst thing you can do, especially in round net, is go into a match, you know, full of nerves and doubting yourself, because your play immediately follows that. And on a two-person team, if you're making a slight mistake, you're losing points for the team. There's not really any way around it. So yeah, just being, I think, confident and calm, really controlling the mental game. So preparing for a match, I just, you know, focus on communicating with my teammate, you know, making sure we're on the same page, making sure we're both relaxed and, you know, we know what we're doing, we have a plan, but we're not freaking out, we're not riding the emotional waves of going into a big match. Yeah, that's definitely always been key for me.
Cool. And so you just touched on a few different things, and I'll come back to Jordy, the question of joining somebody who's had a fairly high amount of success in the sport. Jordy, did you have any personal feelings of doubt before that happened? And did you ever have any of those come in especially probably some of your initial matches?
Can you clarify the question a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll put it in a personal context for me. If I'm as somebody who was an average basketball player, if I go and I am about to play with some of the best college basketball players in the world, I'm gonna have moments before I walk in where it's like nerves and some self doubt in that. And during it, if I make one error, it's really easy for like your mind to just explode with. And I had a guest on yesterday where you start creating this own movie and telling yourself stories of all the stuff that's going to happen. Like, oh, I blew that point. Now we're going to lose and she's going to hate me and she's not going to be hard anymore. Like all that kind of stuff. Did that stuff happen for you?
I think I'm lucky that I'm playing with Becca and that she's the best because like we talked before we teamed up and made sure that it would be a good fit, and like the reasons why we were playing were at least aligning up. And so I think for both of us, Becca, you could elaborate, but I think for both of us it was more than just spike ball. Like we have a friendship, and I know that if I mess up, as long as I'm doing my best, that she's not going to be upset with me, or like she's going to encourage me to always do better. So I didn't have to worry about that, luckily.
Well, um, when Becca was talking before, she talked about communication, and I'm going to come to her with the same question. What is Becca's best communication strategy in competition?
You're asking me, or
I'm asking Jordi about you, and then I'll ask you the other way.
I think before the game, she'd always ask me like, okay, what's going through your head? And then we kind of chat about like what our goals were for the game, or what the goals were for the tournament. So for example, nationals, she asked me what do we want to focus on today? And so then I was like, okay, like I really want to focus on enjoying today and having fun. And so I think that's helpful in knowing when we're playing that if I make a mistake, we're going to, we're going to think about it, like improve it, but we're also going to throw it away and relax and have fun.
Cool. And so that Becca, like, Becca? Have you graduated
yeah,
college? Yeah. And what'd you graduate with? What was your program?
nutrition dietetics.
Okay, so where do like you're talking you Jordy's now referenced it, and you've mentioned some. You've got some pretty advanced ways of approaching the psychology of sport. Does that come from anywhere?
Um, Honestly, I think probably the biggest influencer of that is my husband. So he's the one that actually taught me how to play the year after I graduated high school. Um, and he's an OG in Roundnet. He's been playing for who knows how many years. And he's like king of the mental game. He's an incredible coach. He knows so much about the sport and is an incredible communicator as well. So I've obviously spent a lot of time playing with him, and we've played tournaments together, but also just playing pickup, practicing together. And he's been kind of a coach for my previous team and for the ACA when I was playing with Jordi. So yeah, a lot of what I know about communication comes from him because he's really good at that.
Does he have any strategy that makes him a particularly good communicator?
Do it. Communicate.
Yeah,
That's
that's good.
the main strategy. Yeah, I'm not naturally a good communicator, so even in our relationship, it's he's always the one pushing for communication. But yeah, he's played on several teams, and yeah, is all about just like talking about things, communicating, not only like game plan and strategy, but mental game as well. Like Jordi said, just checking in with your teammate. How are you feeling? What are you thinking today? What's on your mind? That really makes all the difference. And on a two-person sport is really important to communicate and be on the same page, or things are going to fall apart.
Yeah, no kidding. And so I coach, like I mentioned before, I coach university basketball and I coach women's basketball, and that is we spend at least 50% of our time outside of the tactical technical stuff talking about communication as one of our key variables that we're trying to address day in and day out. Jordi, coming in that setting where you have somebody who's really pushing communication, is that something that you were comfortable with beforehand, or is that something that you had to learn?
I think I love communication. I think that's one of my favorite things with anyone. So I really appreciated it when Becca came in with communication as well.
And how do you communicate most effectively? And I'll quantify that for you by saying that, do you like being asked a question? Do you like it when somebody's just super direct and kind of lays it on you? Is there kind of a hybrid in there? Do you have moments where maybe you just want like body language or like a head nod, that kind of thing?
I think any form of communication, I really appreciate it. So, for example, in a game, if I'm like, okay, like, are we good? Like, what's going on? Are we confident here in this point? And Becca just looks at me like, okay, Jordi, let's go. Like, even if she just looks at me and nods, I'm fine. In that case, anyone, gives me a thumbs up. I'm like, oh, cool. It's going well. Like, they feel great. Everything's okay. But yeah, I like asking questions. I like hearing things. I think the most important thing that I've learned is to make sure I listen. Like, listen well when people talk, listen well when I ask questions. And so that's something that I'm always going to work on, and hopefully it'll help me in the long run.
What does listening well look like to you?
I think, like, for me, it's making sure that I hear the person, I understand what they're saying, and like I know what they're asking me. I
Cool.
think it's usually two ways.
Yeah, I like that. And Becca, if just to kind of piggyback on that same idea, what does listening well look like to you as an athlete?
Um, yeah, I would echo a lot of what Jordi said. Just making sure that you're giving space for your teammate to communicate. It's really difficult from the other side. As like I said, I'm not a great communicator. I would definitely say Jordi is actually the better communicator on our team, but I've learned. But if I don't feel like somebody's giving me the space to communicate, I just won't. So as a listener, making sure you're giving your teammate or whoever it is space to be able to bring things up or communicate something that they're thinking about is really important, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And Becca, why do I get the feeling that you can get pretty intense in competition?
I don't know, how much film have you watched?
Well, I'm not going to say anything that I noticed in film, but just if in a two-person sport where communication is definitely going to have to be at a premium, I can imagine, and because you have the experience you have, I can imagine there's moments where your communication gets very intense, and you know exactly how you want the picture to be painted, um, and you're not guessing. Like you know what you want the next thing to be, and you can probably get pretty intense in those moments.
Yeah, I'm definitely very competitive, and I think I have a mostly quiet intensity. Um, Jordi is great with that. I think I've played with people in the past who they don't, it's easy to misinterpret. I get very quiet when I'm focused, and I'm not necessarily a loud vocal player. But if I'm, focused or frustrated, I tend to get really quiet. So yeah, I don't know. Jordi was always great at interpreting that and asking questions if she needed to know that, I wasn't mad at her. She would just clear it up, and that's great.
Okay, this is a really cool thing now, and I honestly had no prediction that we would kind of go down this road. But Jordi, again, as somebody who works with high level female athletes every day, do you just have that in you where you respond to that intensity without really taking it personally, or did you have to learn that ability to not take that kind of maybe critical feedback in the moment super personally and instead be the good listener like you are?
I think it depends on the person. And for Becca, I've seen her play for since I started, and so I know that mentally she's there. And like she's never out of the game. She's always doing what's best for the team, and so I've never taken it personally. And I don't remember where I was going with there. What was the question again?
Just
Speaking of
about
good listeners.
no, it's fine. The worst is when I'm on here and I'm writing notes or something like that, and the person loses their train of thought, and then they're like, what was I saying? And I'm like, oh shit, I don't know. No, just around like when you're getting like critical or intense feedback from any teammate or any person, like did you learn to take that little less personally, or has that always been a part of you?
Yeah, okay. So I've learned to, but also I've noticed that it just depends on the person.
Yeah.
Like if I've seen someone be upset and they know they're mad at someone else, later on I'm going to feel like when they're upset again, they're mad at me this time. So I think it really depends on the person, and Becca's never shown anger towards anyone. So I know that she's always there and she's not going to be upset with me or anything. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And so here's a question. I'm not trying to cause a riff in the team or anything by asking this, but you said she's never shown anger towards anyone. But no offense, Becca, I've watched the film, and other people might see that and might think that maybe she's mad. But there's a difference for you, right? And so Jordi, when you're playing with her or competing with her, what's the difference? Why is there a difference for you? Like other people might see her as mad in that moment, and I don't just mean her. I mean like anybody who's playing or competing with anybody. Other people are going to see that as, oh, they're mad at me, but you don't see that. You drew a very separate line there. Why is that?
I think you have to know the person, like I said earlier, and Becca, like I know that she can get frustrated at herself because she cares about the team and wants to do best for everyone else. And so I know that she wouldn't be upset with me. Like if she shows frustration, and it would be the same with me. If I show frustration, it's usually because of something I did. And I know Becca, I would say I know her pretty well. And I know that like she wouldn't be upset with someone else because of what they did, because she knows they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And Becca, what does that feel like for you when you have a teammate who can really separate those two things? Because I'm going to guess that that hasn't always been the case. If somebody's an intense competitor, they've had the opposite as well, where that person takes everything personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've played with a handful of people casually, but really have only had two serious women's teammates, Jordi and then my previous teammate, Allie, who I've played with for 3 or 4 years prior to that. And both are incredible people. And yeah, I'm very fortunate that both teammates have worked out really well. I don't think it would work to have a teammate that takes a lot of things personally, especially in Roundnet. There's no room for that. Like Jordi said, you can get frustrated with yourself, but you can't even let that affect your play. And there's really no room for being frustrated with your teammate. It's a sport where it's so obvious when mistakes are made that the person who makes a mistake is gonna feel bad about it, because it's always obvious whose mistake it was. It's never a question of like, oh, was it my fault or yours? It's pretty obvious whose mistake it was. So yeah, there's no room for being frustrated with your teammate, unless they're just not trying, which, yeah, I've been fortunate to play with two teammates seriously that was never an issue really, that they weren't trying, they weren't doing their best for the team.
So it sounds to me like for both of you, and Becca, you really just kind of touched on this, is that by putting in the work and by showing your investment, it allows for that emotional space where you're not going to take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably also allows for the space that you spoke about earlier to be able to communicate a little more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And I think that both those things are really important. And one of the reasons, well, actually, there's the inception of you guys being on here in the first place was that the Ocho was playing Spikeball last week randomly, and so I watched it, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna got some time, I'm gonna do a deep dive into Spikeball and or Roundnet. I need to start saying Roundnet. And as I started doing some of that research, it's just like there's going to be a lot of stuff that can be learned from this, just like there's a ton of important lessons that team sports have taken from doubles tennis, and beach volleyball. Some of the biggest lessons that we have in 6-on-6 volleyball and in basketball and hockey and that kind of stuff are lessons that came from beach volleyball, because there's some really, really good motor learning and mental skills things and communication strategies that came from that sport. And so as I was thinking about it, watching the Ocho, and I can't believe I'm plugging the Ocho on the show, but as I was watching the Ocho, I was like, there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff that comes from this as well. And it's so new and so different that's going to provide a whole separate version of learning about this that we don't have yet. And one of the ones that you've now gotten to is how how any teammates communicate with each other. And I'm really interested in the side that you kind of just gave us a ton of insight into, which is how female athletes communicate with each other in moments of competition. The thing that I wonder if this has happened yet to either of you, and maybe it's within Roundnet, maybe it's outside, and if not, I imagine it will eventually. Do you ever get like stereotyped as intense female athletes? Do you ever see any stereotypes around that? And Becca, I'll go with you first.
Um, uh, I don't know. I think maybe a little bit, but not necessarily in a bad way. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I've not perceived it, but I would consider that a good thing. If somebody thought I was an intense female athlete, that's great.
Yeah.
Especially in Roundnet, because yeah, high intensity women's players are kind of rare. We're getting there, but it's still, the women's divisions are tiny. It's hard to even get one at a lot of tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know that I've perceived much of a stereotype around that, at least not in a negative way.
Okay, cool. And I guess maybe, and I'll ask you the same question in a second, Jordi, but I guess maybe to clarify a little bit more, it's kind of like in other sports, there are so many moments, and I've witnessed it. I've coached athletes and worked with athletes who've experienced it, female athletes and male athletes too, but more so female athletes, where they start getting labeled because they're not showing up to social stuff to put in work for their craft. They're super focused and they're working super hard, but people perceive that and they'll label it as having some kind of negative attitude. They might get called names because of that attitude, when really it's the same focus that a male athlete has. It's the same work ethic and that kind of thing that a male athlete has, but there just tends to be maybe a few more labels and stuff like that that get tossed around to female athletes. And I wonder if you've experienced that in other sports, or if that's just never something that you've really been part of.
Yeah. I have not really experienced that, not because I didn't put in the work, just kind of the way things happened. I didn't get into Roundnet until college, pretty much like first year of college. So it was kind of something I went in with and started working at early on. And in college, it's kind of like you can do your own thing and it's fine. Nobody really cares when it comes down to it. So I did spend a lot of time on Roundnet practicing and putting in time and effort. But that was kind of just a personal choice. And I never really felt like, there was any negative connotation to that. The only thing that makes it more difficult with Roundnet is the question, which is starting to go away, thankfully, but the question of like, is it a real sport? So that was something that was a bigger issue at the beginning, especially with like close friends and family, seeing how much time and energy I was putting into it and traveling all over the country for something that, looked like a stupid backyard game. So the intensity with which I was pursuing that, I feel like was a little bit hard for people to grasp, just because it wasn't really an established sport so much yet.
And I asked the question because I think as successful young female athletes, that the way that you approach your craft is something, not just in this question, but in many of the stuff that we talked about, is something that they can learn from. And communication, managing some of those labels, and I guess not even managing them, but understanding that there's sports out there, and there's communities of sport and communities out there where female athletes compete, they work hard, they do just as much as at the exact same level that the guys are doing, and they don't get marginalized or they don't get put down, and the community is solid enough that it's really supportive of those characteristics, which is awesome. Coming up to the is it a real sport question, and I think that this is super interesting because, again, like, I'm far from an expert, but over the last 2 weeks I've probably looked at more spikeball than any other person in North America, just saying, because, like, in prepping to talk to you guys today, I was like, well, I need to learn a lot more than I know now, which is really just that I'm bad at it and I don't totally know if I'm allowed to hit the rim on a serve or not. So as I kind of do a little bit more of a dive into Roundnet and into understanding it, what does training look like? Like, there's, again, maybe if for nothing else, so that I can get a little bit quicker and a little bit better at it. I'll start with you, Jordi. How can I get better at spikeball or train for Roundnet if I want to be better at
I think there's a lot of ways to go about it, and it depends on how you learn best. So there's resources out there now because of the pro athletes that have been pouring into newer athletes in the sport. And so there's tutorials on how to do certain things. There's people that would love to chat with you and answer questions about whatever you want about Roundnet, right?
Yeah.
And there's resources where you can look up games, footage, and understand kind of what they're doing and how to do it. And I think there's a lot of ways to do that now. I actually think within the last year, it's been a huge push for getting footage out there, getting tutorials and all that stuff. But simply, working on your serve at home or working on hits or touches. It's like basketball. You can walk around and dribble basketball going to the grocery store or going on a walk. It's the same thing with spike ball. You just pass it up to yourself like volleyball. So it just depends on how you learn best.
Cool. And Becca, is there a specific component or components of strength conditioning kind of training that are advantageous in spikeball?
Anything that involves hand-eye coordination is really, really helpful.
Damn it.
It's important. The more, like explosive agility, the more of that you can do, the quicker you're going to be around the net. Roundnet's a lot of quick movements, a lot of up and down. You're essentially doing squats and burpees and sprints all in a game all the time. So anything like that is obviously very helpful. But like Jordi was saying, just touches on the ball, working on technique. But playing with people is really the best way to get better. Playing with people that are better than you, playing in tournaments. That's kind of, when I started, there were no how to Roundnet or pro spikers tutorials. There were no videos. People were actually, it was pretty rare for people to film themselves. So there wasn't a lot of footage out there that you could watch. A lot of people now will just study film of themselves and of other people just to get a better understanding of it. But really, I just played a lot, as much as I could, with people who were a lot better than me, and that's how you learn the most. It's uncomfortable and it's embarrassing a lot of times, but that's just the long and short of it. That's how you get better.
Yeah, and really what I'm hearing is that balance between some really random practice, game-like practice, where you're like, you've got to play with other people, whether it's pickup or whether, like, you actually have to have the net out and have four people there and actually play a little bit, and that's going to change everything because everything's in real time, and all the research behind game-like and random practice is really key there. But then also some block practice, some very skill focused practice, like what Jordi was saying, where it's like at some point you have to be practicing a million times how to hit a ball a certain way, and at some point, similar to volleyball, tennis, you're gonna have to get a bunch of serves in because you're gonna have to serve a bunch. You're gonna have to receive a serve a bunch. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool. One of the things that I think is really interesting about it. So I'm a CrossFit coach as really as a hobby, but I'm really passionate about that side of my life as well. And the first time I played Spikeball, it was interesting that you said the thing about doing burpees and all that kind of stuff in it, because I was like this is that, like, functional fitness, not just to plug CrossFit, but like any type of functional fitness mixed with any of the movements and any of the skills that you need in Roundnet. There's a vibe there. Do either of you participate in anything like that? And it doesn't need to be like a particular brand of exercise or anything, but is that anything that either of you are doing? We can start with you, Becca.
Yeah, up until a couple weeks ago, yeah, I spend a lot of time going to the gym. I run for fun, and yeah, just do a variety of workouts. Yeah.
And Jordi, you're near a Canadian CrossFit celebrity in Quebec whose name is Camille LeBlanc Bazinet. I don't know if you've heard the name, but do you do anything like that?
The few times I've worked out, I did CrossFit in high school, and that was more for soccer to stay in shape and strengthen those muscles. And then in college, with our busy schedule, it's hard to keep up with friends and see them. And so naturally, I would do workouts with my friends. So that way I had a way to spend time with them and do what they love. But for the most part, I work out by playing sports. It doesn't really matter what kind.
Cool. And that I think lends itself to the randomness of your sport and preparing for something that you can't really predict to prepare for. Um, Earlier, as you were talking and I was listening well, I was also thinking about the fact that I think this might be one of the most equal sports between genders that's ever existed. And that's totally just off of my outside perspective. And I don't mean in terms of how much it's supported or in terms of how many tournaments there are or anything like that, because I know that there's a disparity there still as interest grows. But I mean, I don't see a lot of ways that co-ed Roundnet couldn't be an elite level thing. Whereas there are ways that doesn't necessarily work so well in other sports. But in Roundnet, like, I truly see the ability for this to be like an elite, high level, males, females, and everybody playing together in the same tournament, same competition, that kind of thing. Jordi, is that something that you see being possible?
Maybe you should go to Becca first.
Okay, Becca.
All right. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's definitely possible. There's another big draw to Roundnet for me is, and motivation to continue to get better is because there's always been that possibility of playing with the guys and hanging, with the best of them. And so far, I would say we're not there. The top 5 women's players can definitely hang with the top 25 men's players, but once you get into the top 10, it's not really much of a contest. And I don't even know for sure what it is. Serving is a big part of it. It's just hard. I don't know if it's being smaller or not as quick, but it's hard to get good serve returns on, the top men's players that are hitting the ball, 4 feet away from your outstretched arm.
Right.
That's not necessarily unique to women. If they're hitting good serves like that, it's hard for anybody to return them. But that's one of the big factors, I think, keeping women out of the top. But yeah, it's definitely, there have been several women's players that have earned premier status, which is, one of the top levels. So it is really cool to I think you're right, to play in a sport where it's easier for women to show that they can play just as well as the guys. There's not as much of a disparity, I think, because a lot of the sport depends on technique, finesse, quickness and agility, not necessarily sheer strength and power. So yeah.
That's awesome. Jordi, do you want me to come back to you?
Sure. I think there's both. I think looking at it from my perspective, I've played multiple sports co-ed, and I would say I enjoy playing other sports co-ed rather than Roundnet. But I also really enjoy playing with men, just not necessarily in this co-ed specific tournament.
Gotcha.
I think like volleyball, when you say like we're talking about serves right now in round net, in volleyball, you're still working like anyone can receive the serve. So it's a little different than in round net where it's more one-on-one. So when you're met with a male athlete and they're serving at you, it's very like it's very one-on-one. So
Yeah.
I've seen it. I think it's harder for me to play co-ed round net than say co-ed soccer, co-ed volleyball,
Okay.
co-ed. I would say basketball. I'd say like it's co-ed round net's a little bit easier than co-ed basketball, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't I wouldn't say it's off the table though. I think people really enjoy co-ed round net as well.
Yeah. And it's probably really, I'm probably getting well ahead of us in terms of just, it hasn't been around long enough to really have a big enough data pool to figure out what to do, what not to do, how to make it work, and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I'm going to hit you guys with some questions real quick. So I'm going to call it rapid fire, but it's not going to be rapid fire at all. It's just more rapid fire than it's been. Um, I'm, if you could see one thing, and Jordi, I'll start with you. If you could see one thing happen for Spikeball in the next 2 years, what would that be?
I would say an increase in women participation in the sport.
Cool. And Becca, you can't use the same one. What about you?
I would also say that. um, but I think also, and this is the direction we're moving, but more international competition. The World Championship is hopefully happening the first ever in September, and just seeing more, different countries competing against each other has such a special feel to it. I would love to see more of that continue to happen for the sport.
Awesome. And I think it's it's a pretty good spectator sport too. Like there are other individual sports or double sports where they're not very good spectator sports, but it really is. I'm totally just speaking in my opinion. It really is on that level of like of tennis and stuff like that, where it's interesting to watch. Like it's not some other individual or double sports where it's hard to see what's going on or something like that. Like you can broadcast it on TV, you can go watch a match close or even from a stand setup or something like that and see what's up. It's not hard to grow viewership, in my opinion, because it's interesting to watch and you can see everything that's going on, which I think are the two key parts to making something a spectator sport. Um, Becca, I'll start with you on the next one. When you've spoken a lot about giving space, so we talked about giving space for somebody to communicate, and I had a guest on the show. Actually, the episode just came out today, which you guys have probably already listened to as fans of the show. Um, his name's Justin Sua, and he's the mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays. And he works with a lot more people than just baseball. He's done NFL and other MLB teams and WWE and PGA athletes. And if you get a chance to check out his stuff, I would recommend it to both of you. But he said something that I thought was a really unique way to put building athlete relationships. And he said, build a relationship so strong that it can bear the weight of truth. What does that mean to you?
Mm. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I think in RoundNet that means that kind of some of the things we've already touched on, you have to have that communication and you have to be willing to own up to your mistakes. So that, when your teammate approaches you saying like, hey, this is what you're missing, or, you're not filling this defensive hole, confronts you with something, it's not a personal attack. It's a critique on, like, you need to improve that part of the game to help your team succeed. So yeah, I would definitely say that's a great point, that you have to have that relationship where you can openly communicate so that pointers, critiques are not taken personally. They're just helping the team succeed.
Nice. And Jordi, I'll change the question a little bit for you, and you can add to that same question if you want, but I think Becca's kind of hit the nail on the head pretty good. Um, when we say build a relationship so strong that it can bear the weight of truth, is there a particular thing, Jordi, that you look for in a relationship with a teammate that has that relationship strength?
Um, I think for me, I choose a teammate based on the person. I choose a teammate based on their personality, the reason they do things, and kind of how they look at life. And so for me, I like trusting the person going into it, but also building our relationship during. If they're to say like critique or whatever, I have to understand and go in with a mindset to learn. And so I think it really depends on me as well as them on what the purpose of it is or what the intent is behind it.
Okay, cool. And I think you have a luxury, but like you said, you also have to be pretty good at it, and that you get to pick your teammate, right? So it's and you can pick wrong, I'm sure, and maybe you have in the past, and we don't need to go there, but in a situation where we can't pick our teammates, basketball, or we can't pick all of them anyway. You might be able to pick to go play with a particular program or a particular league or something like that, but you don't get to pick everybody that's on the team. Do you have any strategies? And if you say, you can also just say no to this. Do you have any strategies for building that relationship with someone when you don't get to pick them and maybe you don't necessarily gel with them?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a relationship outside of the sport in order to have a relationship inside the sport. So if there's any conflict during sport, I think sometimes it has to be brought up outside, and I think it's important to strengthen that relationship in every way possible. But also going into it with an understanding mindset of, okay, where are they at? What are they coming to? What's the purpose of their intent? Just asking myself questions as well as asking them questions to understand the purpose.
Awesome. Awesome. That's really good feedback. Becca, what about you? How do you approach those relationships where you don't necessarily gel with the person, but you have to work with them?
Yeah. Yeah, I've played on a lot of team sports, obviously, and this extends outside of sports, but have had a lot of coaches that focus a lot on that aspect, kind of forming relationships. And I think it's important to put in the effort, even if you know going into it that, you know, this isn't a person that you necessarily gel with or would be friends with just, you know, on if you saw them walking down the street. But when you're on a team, that means something different. So just putting in the effort to form a relationship and using commonalities, you know, like why you love the sport that you're playing, that you're on a team for, kind of finding those bridges so that even if it's someone that you're not going to be best friends with, you know, your personalities just don't mesh, you're able to still have a healthy relationship within the sport. And yeah, like Jordi said, pursuing that relationship outside of the sport can certainly help to strengthen that.
Nice. See, I'm as you guys talk, and again, that's why I thought that maybe you had some kind of like sports psych background or something like that. It's just like I'm imagining the value in this conversation, especially for female athletes who sometimes get misinterpreted because they're an intense competitor or they don't communicate that well, but they do care and they're passionate and that kind of thing. So their actions get misinterpreted by teammates and those around them. But B, also just understanding how to interact in a team, and what I'm hoping is that, and I know I'm gonna boost this to a bunch of the athletes that I've worked with and work with, is that when they listen to it and watch it, it's like this helps me in my situation where I am that person on the team where people just don't get me and they don't like me because they don't get me, or I have someone on my team where I don't like them or they don't seem to fit in and that kind of thing. I think there's a ton of value there. Just before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you both a couple of the same questions. And the first one's really easy. The second one you might have to think about a little bit. So Becca, for you, if people want to follow you or connect with you, where's a place that you would want them to go to follow you or connect with you?
That's a good question.
Like online, not like your address, just like
Yeah,
social media.
yeah, not that. Probably Facebook. I don't really use my personal Instagram. now that I run a business, I'm trying to get better at social media.
You can plug
But
that business too if you want.
what did you say?
You can plug the business too if you want.
Oh, I own a bed and breakfast. Stonewall Jackson Inn, Harrisonburg, Virginia. There you go. Yeah, probably my Facebook is the thing I would check most frequently.
Cool. That's just Becca Graham?
Hmm.
Awesome. Jordi, what about you?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with Facebook.
Okay. And
Oh.
yeah, I was going to
What?
say, nobody does Facebook anymore.
In Canada, that's all they use.
I'm in Canada and I am Canadian.
Apparently, there are two different Canadas.
Oh, there's a lot of different Canadas, just like there's a lot of different Americas.
Yeah.
Jordi, you mentioned you have a business too. Do you want to plug that?
A business?
Didn't you say something about working from home or running a business or?
Oh, no. I just work for Spikeball part-time.
Oh, I want to work for Spikeball.
It's a good company.
I'm gonna go on their page right now and see if they have any work. The next question might take a little bit of thinking, and this is the one that I asked to every guest. And Becca, I'll start with you again. If you could give advice on learning or acquiring new skills, whether it's mental skills, emotional skills, physical skills, anything like that, what would that advice be in a phrase or two?
Yeah, I think I would probably say my biggest advice would be kind of like I said in Roundnet, in order to get better at Roundnet, play with people that are better than you. Same type of thing with learning. Surround yourself with people who know more than you or who are better learners than you. And kind of like what Jordi said, be a sponge. Just allow yourself to make mistakes in learning, allow yourself to absorb things from other people. Yeah, there's so many people out there with so many different skills and insights and so much knowledge that, yeah, if you're going to learn, you kind of have to just get yourself around people that are better than you or know more than you.
Cool, it's badass. Jordi, what about you?
I think I agree with Becca. Be a sponge and just take in as much as you can, even from people that in the sport aren't at the level you are. I think there's something to learn from every situation and every person. But I think a big thing for me lately is start. Just start somewhere. The hardest part is to start doing, and once you start, the road just keeps going. And so I think that's what I would say is just start somewhere.
Cool. And that it sounds, you made that really articulate and simple, but if you were to ever brand a shirt as your athletic career takes off, I feel like that could be a badass Nike shirt, just like start, period. If people want to learn more about Spikeball Roundnet, if like it would be really cool if somebody who wants to support the sport or anything like that gets on here, sees this, where would they go to best support the sport?
Yeah, if they're looking to get into the sport more, there are several different ways. There's a Spikeball Roundnet Association Facebook page. Spikeball also has several Instagram accounts, Spikeball Inc., Spikeball Roundnet Association. Start following the sport and getting connected with other players. There's an app. Download the Spikeball app. Right now, Spikeball's not encouraging people to get out and play, which they usually are. Right now, stay home. But usually you can use the app to find players near you, to host pickup games, things like that. And then join tournaments. Just go to a tournament. You'll meet so many people. You'll fall in love with the community, and it'll be history from there. So if you can get yourself to a tournament, you're set.
Awesome. And for anybody watching this, I am becoming the unofficial ambassador to the sport. Now that I know all the links and everything that I've gone through, I'm gonna be trying to go to Belgium. I'm gonna be checking out as much as I can online. And honestly, you'll see me boosting a bunch of stuff moving forward as soon as everybody gets back to competing and stuff like that, trying to share as much, because I enjoy playing it and I enjoy watching it. And I think that more people should do both of those things when they're able to. I really appreciate the time. I think that both of you had some awesome insight And it's not like you're doing a ton of ESPN interviews yet. And I thought that you both kicked ass in terms of being able to provide a lot of really good insight. And like I said, I think that you both shared some stuff that we're going to have a lot of female athletes for sure, but I think athletes across the spectrum who take something from this in terms of how they communicate and work with teammates and succeed and fail with teammates. And I think that there was a lot of good stuff there. So thank you for that. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to check out more anywhere you get podcasts by subscribing to our podcast, subscribing to our YouTube channel, or following us on Instagram @Boost Institute.